Hi, and welcome to another Austin Software Co-operatives Meetup. This is our September 2021 book review on The People's Republic of Walmart by Leigh Phillips and Michal Rozworski. It's available on Audible, pretty good read, and looking forward to the mind map conversation. Watson, you ready?
Yeah, sure. All right. This is a mind map. Hopefully everyone has the link. Let's get right into it. So, first thing, does anyone have any overall impression of the book that they want to share? Something that jumps out to them? Maybe some type of summary that they want to express before we get in. Opinions, these types of things overall. All right. Oh, Jeff's raising his hand. Let's go.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to monopolize the conversation, but I love this book. So why I love this book is because I'm a member of a tech co-op like you all are, and I find we're struggling. We've been struggling, and I think part of the problem is that it's hard to plan, right? I kind of personally loathe the anarchy of the market, if you will. You know, it's impossible to make long-term plans. You don't know what to expect. You can't even budget effectively. And I was intrigued by this book's assertion that planning actually works, and that as we build the cooperative movement, I kind of feel like if we get both local, state, and even national government to support worker co-ops, we could get regular work in a predictable way. And that's that. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, that's a good summary or good a view, I think, informative. Use the term anarchy, and in the book they quote Noam Chomsky talking about islands of tyranny and saying that that's really what a business entity, a corporation is, because of the authoritarianism. Another book that Noam Chomsky has is entitled Anarchy, but it's interesting when we use that term. What do we mean? Most people have the connotation of no rules, and that's what it means. But if you want to do or follow Chomsky, it would be power is illegitimate until proven otherwise. So you can have a hierarchy if it's legitimate. So so I find that interesting. This whole topic of planning versus what you would say anarchy or some other way of some type of order evolving in some way. It's very interesting to me. So anyone else? All right, let's see here. So, People's Republic of Walmart. The author jumps right in with some familiar themes within this community and this meetup. We're talking about externalities. So here we've got, if only Walmart's operational efficiency, its logistical genius, its architecture of agile economic planning could be captured and transformed by those who aim towards a more egalitarian, liberatory society. This would be great. if we could do that, I've used the example of Apple, but I'm going to probably change it to Walmart since we have a rich reference here. So we have our examples of where markets fail, externalities. I like these references. We have, let me go ahead and make this a bit bigger. So the health and safety standards of most mining operations were achieved not because some person at the top of a hierarchy decided to do something, but because of the trade unions. We have high-speed internet was not profitable. It wasn't because markets solved it, because the profit would move. The profit kind of dictates that service providers would serve the more concentrated areas. They don't want to do rural areas. This was a new one for me, antibiotics. So antibiotics are less desirable to drug companies and venture capitalists because they are more successful than other drugs. Everyone says this as far as drug companies, but I actually just never really seen any like a good actual reference, something that you can point to. I like this reference because antibiotics are good. The drug companies don't like them, in any case. So they're incentivized for chronic diseases where they want to take their medicine every day for the rest of their lives. Interesting. This is something I would like to follow up on. And then we have Jack Ma talking about planning and saying, okay, the fatal flaw of state planning was that the planners didn't have enough information to make good decisions. And the author finishes the introduction saying that the Walmart is an example of a planned economy. We're going to see later that it's a very big economy, about half the size of Russia in 1990 or something like that. Does anyone have any comments? All right.
The drug thing caught my eye, but partly because there's a Johnson & Johnson just did a recall on some sunscreen sprays, Aveeno and Neutrogena. I don't know if y'all know those. And there's a chemical in them that causes cancers like leukemia. And the interesting other side is Johnson & Johnson is a leader in drugs that help with people who have leukemia. So anyways, when you look at all of the medical side tied in and other things like that, healthcare, the health side and private.
All right, anyone else? Let's go. I want to say this first chapter is a hard hitter. Let's go. While centrists and conservatives who cheerlead the market stop short of advocating a world where everything is allocated via markets, they still do not offer arguments explaining why their preferred mixture of market and planning is superior. And I find this to be, in my personal experience, when I'm going back and forth, the same as the author. People get to the point to where they say, well, there is, laissez-faire doesn't exist. Pure socialism, communism, whatever, doesn't exist. Noam Chomsky actually calls the Soviet Union state capitalism. He doesn't call it communism. That's interesting side note. So it will say that nothing pure exists. It's a mix. Okay, well then what's the argument for the mix that you prefer? When do you say that you should start doing some type of central planning? And I'll just go ahead and say that from what I gather from the author, a big part of it is information. So when you have enough information, which now we can gather from technology, you can plan more. We're going to get into that with why information limits markets or people trying to get around markets or whatever. So that's what I'm thinking. Anyone else? All right. All right. So let's go into this. This is Mises. I want to say Mises is pronunciation. Someone on the libertarian side or a neoliberal side would they really like Mises. They really like the author rightly quotes Mises and Hayek, and as far as some of the godfathers of laissez-faire and you shouldn't centrally plan. One of the arguments is, this is a good quote, the mammoth scale of information needed for producers, consumers, and every other actor in between, and for every stage and location of production of the multitude of products needed in society is beyond the capacity of planning boards. No human process could possibly gather all the necessary data to assess it. So it's really, the argument is that it's setting prices too hard for one person to do. That's the simple argument. Mises would be the one that would kind of develop it in his books. Now the pushback is Walmart is not merely a planned economy, but a planned economy on the scale of the USSR, smack in the middle of the Cold War. In 1970, Soviet Union is about 800 billion. In today's money, Walmart in 2017 is about 485 billion. So comparable. But does anything jump out to anyone with any of this? Does anyone have any strong opinions before or after seeing any of these quotes, reading the book, or anything like this? Does any of this stuff seem obvious to people or shocking to people or anything like that?
It felt right, but more because I guess we're the co-op focus that we have and the intuition that there's control in the hierarchies and stuff. But I would say when you look at the size and really think about it, that it's in some ways it was kind of shocking to when you look at all of it together and then you start comparing it. Of course, then it goes into the other thoughts of, so why is there the big argument that it doesn't work?
yeah, so really, it's interesting to, being in software, all through the 90s and hearing from the outside some of the technological marvels of the supply chain management of Walmart. And then also Dell was another one people would point to. As far as, just in time, we're going to order everything. And you would hear stories in the 90s of, as soon as you pick something off the shelf, it's ordered at Walmart, that kind of thing. And the order goes all the way to China or whatever, that kind of thing. And it revolutionized supply chain management and everything like that. From our perspective in tech, we all looked at it as completely software driven and all stuff like that. And that's how this book looks at it. It's a big data is the phrase he uses. Again, to drive home the concept, to go back to Mises, the central planner doesn't have enough information to set prices. The author kind of gets a little bit more specific and saying, the argument's really the central planner can't really manage the supply, right? So it really can't say, okay, I'm going to, let's go into actually we have it right here. You can't really deal with these problems, the bullwhip effect. So let's go on this. The bullwhip effect is the kissing cousin to the Stalinism shortage problem, if you've ever heard of long bread lines in the old USSR, and as an argument against communism, or people saying that about Cuba. First identified in 1961, the bullwhip effect describes the phenomenon of increasingly wild swings in mismatched inventories against product demand. The further one moves along the supply chain toward the producer, ultimately extending to the company's extraction of raw materials. Any slight change in customer demand reveals a discord between what the store has and what the customers want, meaning there's either too much or too much stock or too little. Because the customer demand is often fickle in its prediction, involves some inaccuracy, businesses will carry an inventory buffer called safety stock. Moving up the chain, each node will observe greater fluctuations, thus greater requirements for safety stock. One analysis performed in the 1990s assessed the scale of the problem to be considerable. A fluctuation at the customer end of just 5% up or down will be interpreted by other supply chain participants as a shift in demand of up to 40%. So if you can imagine buying 40% or 35% extra things and having them sitting around in the warehouse, be very expensive and could make your competitors, if they were able to not do that, avoid doing that, they could beat you. This is information will allow you to get around this. And Walmart is able to get around this. I've heard stories of Walmart min-maxing everything. There was one thing I heard was they would say to their vendors, actually, we don't own we have not purchased anything in your truck. You can drive your truck to the warehouse. We don't own anything into it until it comes off the truck into the store. So you're going to bring all of your wares put them in the truck and all that, and have it come all the way over there. Then at that point, that's when we own it. You know, pushing to make it to where they're playing around with this when the as far as when the supply is fulfilled and pricing and all the stuff, and it's part of what gives them the edge. Does anyone have any comments? All right. So Walmart being the example of, because of superior planning, internal superior planning of something that would be the size of a country as far as money and winning. Sears would be the opposite. They tried to do an internal market where they would have the different divisions operating and competing, and they got their lunch eaten, essentially. So this is what was brought up as a counterexample, which failed. All right. Any other comments? We don't need to get into that.
Well, you know, the authors are so funny. It's why one of the reasons why I could reread the book. But there's a quote that really changed my attitude toward logistics, just because that's what you were just talking about, where he, I think it's the end of this chapter, where they say that, you know, you may be thinking, why does this book sound like a capitalism filleting airport business book? And then he says, suck it up, comrade. Socialism is all about logistics.
That is funny. You know, it's funny. Another statement from on the military side is amateurs talk about strategy and professionals talk logistics. So that the argument is that, you know, you might watch a film and say Battle of the Bulge in World War II or something, look at that pincer movement or whatever it is that you might think of strategy from, you know, as an amateur looking at strategy. And the generals are masters of taking 150,000 people, have all of their food, all of their equipment, and putting them right next to you to try to attack you in a couple days. Whoever can do that wins. That's the argument. So like logistics is the and I guess really, I don't know, I'm gonna say for the past 100 years, that's been the real skill set of the highest levels echelon of
even before
military.
then, it ended Napoleon in Russia.
Yeah. That's when it was not known. That's when it was not known, and then they learned, and so that's the same. So yeah, that's a great example. Anyone else? All right, let's go into Amazon. This is who we had a problem with now, right? That's just a nice little tidbit. Amazon stole some of the managers from Walmart for the logistics savvy. I'd like to see the reference for that. I didn't see one.
They saved 2.3 billion. They were able to step away from 2.3 billion in taxes last year. I think it was like 9 something, their corporate tax rate. So low 20, and 21% would be the normal. And they were able to get it to around 9 something. Yeah, Amazon.
You're trying to get us to be more angry, or what are you
Yeah,
trying to do?
get you more angry
Okay.
before we get going. Now get going.
All right. All right. All right. So, oh man, this was interesting to read, and then, you know, to see someone try to simplify some of the hard problems and describe them to regular reader, you know, off the street. Yeah, I'm impressed. So they're talking about in software, we would say, oh, these problems are NP hard. You ain't solving them. you learn to try to categorize a certain type of problem so that you know, oh no, I don't want to try to challenge that. Let me go look and see if someone else. Let me go ahead and get someone who's a computer scientist and look at their algorithm and apply that kind of thing. And you skip over. These are optimization problems, and they could take the lifetime of the universe to solve. But let's just use approximations, heuristics. Is that another word for that? Yes. So bin packing is one. Trying to figure out what fits where. Traveling salesman problem. You got a bunch of people out there that are delivering things. You want to have them deliver it in the most optimal way. That's one of those things that for a computer programmer, oh, that's simple, and you get your lunch eaten. All of these things, but information seems to be a really good way, a better way, better than the market. That's what the author is saying. And I would agree. If you were to just deliver things based off of how or when someone placed the order, you get your lunch eaten. If you were to pack things the way that people would order, that would be what the market would say. You get your lunch eaten. And Amazon doesn't do that. So you need the central planning. That's the argument. The central planning is more efficient because of the information and the algorithms. All right. That was my summary of what he's saying. What do you all think? Taylor, what do you think based off of what you know with Amazon and outside of the cloud stuff? You know, I'm a fan of some of the people that come out of Amazon. Some of the programmers, I look at them as like Steve Yagi is one. He's somebody that I recommend people that are developers. Some of his writing, I recommend them, everybody to read them. I put them in like top 10 important things to read for a developer. So I really like them. As far as being
what's his name?
Steve Yagi. The Kingdom of Nouns. This is really for programmers. Like if you're hardcore programming and that kind of thing, Steve Yagi, he's somebody. He left Amazon, went to Google. He's kind of a fire starter. But yeah, what do you guys think of Amazon being another one that does this internal planning?
I mean, I guess besides trying to convince people that planning is good and the depending on the markets is going to fail for, like, well, they get into morals and stuff, but the other part that is there, but I don't think it's really talked about, is learning from these companies. It doesn't matter that their goals are immoral. There's a lot of stuff that are amoral or whatever, however you want to look at it. But Amazon's done a lot of amazing stuff. Way before the cloud, the way that they were structuring their own, they started putting APIs and stuff to tie in like book resellers and everything else. So you could, if you're a bookstore and listing stuff, and that all tied in with the information gathering and prices and stuff, and you could adjust your prices as a seller on Amazon. So they're way ahead on trying to make that available. And then all the stuff that they've done with the AWS stuff, the cloud stuff, that just ties right, it keeps extending from that. So how are you going to share information and distribute the sharing so you can have different groups that can understand and own an area, but make it available to other areas, and then make sure that they can respond based on whatever's happening with yours, and likewise, and then you have larger and larger services that do the same thing. And then they've done, for those that don't know, that a lot of stuff with driving things with like chaos testing, so trying to cause disruption and stuff. And I think there's a lot that could be learned from that if you want to apply it like society-wise. And we're saying we want to try to anticipate what Amazon is doing, anticipating what you want. You'd look at things like, why not anticipate that we need to get antibiotics into a certain area, or anticipate, like, I don't know, whatever other thing that may be needed in society, and getting it there ahead of time to help would be a positive. And then stuff with like the chaos testing and everything has to do with ensuring that all of those rivers of information keep flowing back, not just that the services work, that's part of it, but the logistics, that the logistics don't fall apart and whenever things start going bad, and rather than ideal. And planning for that, disasters and stuff, seems more theoretical rather than live, or I don't know. So a lot to learn.
Yeah. Here's another and interesting. So the themes of the book, as far as where I'm going with the information, if you were to look at, say, Tom Peters, as far as management consultant, probably the most influential alive since Peter Drucker, I think, passed on. His whole thing in the 90s was to say, it was kind of bordering on, oh, you should try to be more like the market. But it was an interesting way, which kind of splits the difference in here. It's basically, you should expose your internal services to the market. That doesn't disagree with what's said here. The argument, the premise here is more information is better. So gathering information from the market, there's nothing here that denies that. And Amazon said, you know what? We could have internally our Tom Peters, and I want to say Tom Peters influenced Amazon, where the whole thing of, we're going to expose our internal services externally. We're going to say, even though we have our data centers, we're going to make our data centers in such a way that all of our the people who consume those services and all of those things, it's not just internal, it's external. And we're going to learn, because the external, they're basically going to be, to simplify, they're basically going to be our QA. If it's not good enough for the external, it's not good enough for the internal. The only person I know of that was saying that was computers, and they were doing it 2007. So it's kind of but the gathering of the information, they were about gathering information. And but that doesn't go against planning. Gathering information, according to the authors, that's the thing that enables planning. Don't deny markets. If you can have them and get information from them, get them. You can also use it. So that kind of splits the difference there with Amazon. Like, they really dominated with that.
Well,
Anyone else?
Well,
Go
yeah,
ahead.
except there's one thing though about that, because the authors drive home this point several times, that while what the set of all things that are useful certainly overlaps with the set of all things that are profitable, they're not coincidence. And then, so he talks about, fossil fuels, global warming. You started out talking about the externalities. So the problem is that the market only measures price, not what's useful. And it can cause a lot of troubles, because if that's all we measure is price, we will continue to produce bad things that are profitable, and we won't produce good things that aren't profitable.
That is a great observation. And it's funny with this specific, Taylor, remember we met a long time ago? We met with a young lady who actually worked for the Amazon services arm. And she was saying, this is a long time ago, it was like 5 years ago, probably more. And she was saying that they actually were not profitable. They weren't making money off of the services. And when I say services, just for everybody to understand, Amazon, their data centers, anyone can basically rent a computer in their data center. All of Netflix runs on Amazon computers, right? So they weren't making any money off that. It wasn't profitable. They literally were doing it for the information, for what I was saying earlier. So that would be towards the author's point of planning. Knowing that you want more information and getting it and saying, okay, even though it's not profitable right now, maybe it'll become profitable or not, but we're going to go ahead and use that for these other things. So that would be a complementary service. I believe they're profitable now, but they weren't for a very long time. So who else? Anyone else? Strong opinions? No? All right. Does anyone have a chapter that they want to go over, that they want to get to, because it's 7:44. We got 15 minutes or so.
So, well, there were a bunch of good chapters, but as tech people, one of the things that fascinated me, that kind of, when you start to look for alternatives, was the Socialist Internet chapter, Allende's Proyecto Cinco.
Cybersyn.
Yeah. Let me bring that up. So yeah, that is funny, because I don't have that in the mind map. And I thought, I want to say someone else brought that up too. So I didn't think I was going to be able to get there. So do you want to give a overview of the chapter?
Well, I can never do as good a job as you can, but I'll try to. I'll tell you what I like about it as the best I can. So basically, the idea that there were the use of information technology in a socialist experiment in 1972 in Chile suggests possible ways that we could build sort of a better future using planning that's democratic. They were able to aggregate information in real time. the couple of things that were kind of fascinating about it that need more exploration was that it was decentralized to a certain degree, and they realized it's not that one of the solutions kind of relates to what was said earlier that you summarized very well, is that you get large amounts of data that are too hard to compute. But what if you don't really need all that information at the national level? Things can be decided locally. You can keep the information from growing too big. And I started thinking of computer science, like data structures that might make this more effective. But they were able to actually save the government and break a strike that was meant to tear down the government using this early internet.
Right. Yeah. So I think it was Jose that said something about this chapter.
Yeah, so I had read about CyberSyn. I forget exactly in which text, and I found it fascinating. And I think it's in Jeff Susna's book, Designing Delivery, where I got introduced to cybernetics as, sort of a more fundamental concept than, Terminator. And so reading about cybernetics in a socialist context in the book was super fascinating to me. Like Jeff said, I think about, the flow of information not being centralized, where these sort of, smaller organizations being able to share that data horizontally instead of all the way up to a central station and then back down, enable them to do, sort of more regional decision making, which I thought was, really interesting. And I'm hoping to, maybe learn a little bit more about the project. I think they mentioned in the book there's some like recent papers about cybernetics, within the context of a planned economy. So this is just super interesting to me.
All right.
So Jose, I promise to follow up with you on that because I want to learn more about that too.
Yeah, absolutely.
There is a book on it, Le Project CyberSyn.
Yeah. Yeah, I think they mentioned that there's a person from Chile who wrote a lot about it. So I'm hoping to see if I can get my hands on that, because that'd be really interesting to read. I think it was a journalist or something.
The only one I've found though is it's in French. 2017 publication. But I think it'd be pretty cool to have like a follow-up talk on where if we can find enough information to dig into it.
So what was the main takeaway of the cybernetics chapter for you all?
I think for me, it was where it clicked that, good intentions or, using usefulness as a signal instead of price and profit is not enough unless the data is democratized and people are able to make decisions at lower levels and decide what to do with that. I think it was towards the end of that chapter where the authors make the point that the tools were there for the people to make the decisions and not the algorithm making the decisions for them. So I think that was my biggest takeaway from that chapter. And I think it kind of wrapped up the whole point of the book for me in a way.
Yeah. There's a theme in that I enjoyed in the book where it's saying he's always saying the planning needs to be democratic. So the way that they put it was you can go off the rails if you're driven by this profit motive. And kind of implicitly, if you're democratic, maybe you won't be driven by the profit motive, but even if you are, maybe you won't be exploited because you're part of the decision-making process. And then implicitly, it tends to be the case that when you push decisions down towards in a democratic fashion, people tend to be less exploitative. So there's all those things. So yeah, that's a reoccurring theme in this battle of planning top down versus not. This whoever is closest to the problem, let them decide. I don't think you would find much pushback with that principle on either side. And I don't think you would. I think that would be where some of this would, where the rubber meets the road. And so now you have the stronger tools for information. You give the tools to the people that have the problem. So let's try to get into some of this with healthcare, because we do have an issue there. So it's at a high level. I like this chapter because I wasn't familiar with healthcare in Britain and the history of it. Looks like they tried to have an organic setup of healthcare, where it was very local. Healthcare, this is like World War II, or before, pre-World War II. Healthcare was largely a luxury. The wealthy hired personal doctors. The rest simply did without. Then next stage, working class organizations of all kinds began to experiment with mutual aid. They formed friendly societies and started pooling money. And you had local little clinics that popped up. And this was around certain industries like coal mining. And then the worker class started demanding or organizing around healthcare. Then the UK said, okay, let's go ahead and make this group called the NHS, and we're going to start trying to have healthcare for everyone. One of the things, and this is kind of where the rubber meets the road, you kind of have experts, so those would be doctors. But then you have the back and forth of, okay, are the doctors going to plan it? Who's going to plan it? Authors kind of, for what I've seen, when I gather, the author's argument is actually a holistic solution is needed. The people that are affected, in some of the other literature, the affected interests, that phrase, they need to be, whoever's affected needs to have input in the decision-making process. But that goes back and forth with the experts. So you have experts who know better, in quotes, and it's kind of hard to argue against a doctor knowing what the treatment should be. And then you have people who are affected. So how do you solve that? Well, having top down and whoever's delivering the service, that's it. That would be more, and it's kind of like, and having what they would say, doctors being independent contractors, kind of like what we have here in the United States, in some sense. Trying to have someone that would be a professional manager telling the doctors, these are the services that you are going to provide or not provide, and this is what gets paid. That's another one. And I guess the pushback here with the titled chapter, nationalism is not enough. Sometimes you need, this problem is not an easy problem to solve. You can't just say, nationalize all of it. So nationalize meaning it's going to be a top-down planning. Get the technocrats, this is a word, in this case would be the doctors. They're going to plan it top down. His thing is, I'm going to summarize. Actually, you need that feedback loop to be a lot smaller. You need to have the people that are the affected interests being part of the decision-making process. From what I've seen in the argument here. I like this quote here. UK spend just over 9% of GDP on healthcare, still below average for countries in the global north. By comparison, the market-based system in the United States consumes nearly double that figure, 17%, while still denying care to millions. So we are inefficient here. Good argument for no, that was not good. Good argument for inefficiencies of markets, leaving something on the table. If you're talking with somebody who their whole argument is based on efficiencies, you probably want to use something like this to say, here's where there's an inefficiency. So this is convincing with these numbers. Does anybody have a comment here? Oh, I love this. I've seen this in a bunch of places. Margaret Thatcher reportedly called Tony Blair her greatest achievement. So Tony Blair, it would be someone that would be, if for people in the United States, Tony Blair would be like the Democrat. He would be like the left.
Well, particularly
And
Bill Clinton.
I was gonna say.
Yeah, Bill Clinton, right? Yeah. And then Margaret Thatcher is Ronald Reagan on the right.
Yeah.
And she's saying that she created her greatest achievement is Bill Clinton, to say what Jeff is saying. That's that is eye-opening to, I would say, most people.
And also in the book they say that the person whose I guess philosophy they follow or was inspired by some person from Chicago was actually
Milton?
the one that I'm sorry?
Milton.
Right.
Milton.
Yeah. Was also the one that basically was followed in Chile after the coup.
You talk about
that was
the
my
Chicago boys. Yeah, the Chicago boys. If you look that article on Wikipedia, and you'll really, I mean, if you didn't get enough from this book, you'll really go down into the rabbit hole with that. But yeah, Milton Friedman and Hayek before him. But yeah, there's a lot of nefarious things going on there. So, but I like this. Tony Blair is the greatest achievement. I'm kind of upset a bunch of people. So, anyone else have any comments here? We've got, it's 8 o'clock. Going to this conclusion here. The good news is planning works. Bad news is it works within the confines of a profit system that restricts what is able to be produced to that which is profitable. So long as this is profitable, the system allows what is harmful to continue to be produced. It's kind of the whole thing. Like, you can use information for good or for evil, and it is something that I believe in strongly. You can really, really go even the next level. You can make it to where people exploit themselves. That would be the ultimate thing to do if you want to be very controlling, very nefarious, the antagonist, the puppeteer. You really want people to, of their own free will, submit and give their information up and follow your rules and have them believe that it's their own choice. That would be the ultimate. And that's a new way to do things. So we need to be mindful of that with how the information is used. We need to have it be democratic.